The question I'd like to answer for you is whether or not the Chinese written language has an alphabet. So, if we look here at these two native speakers, speaking a language that they both learned as young people, they have no problem communicating with each other in their native language. This is something that everyone who is a human and who has language capacity does. Whether or not they can read and write, everybody can speak. But as soon as you try to take spoken words and express them in a written format, it becomes very complicated and not obvious how to do it. So let's take a look at one of the first systems of writing that was developed. This is in ancient Egypt. And you will notice that these symbols here are based on actual things. So this one here is a bird, and that one there is the sun, and this one over here is a man. This type of writing is known as ideographic. And a lot of people, when they hear that word, they think that the whole language is just communicated in terms of pictures of what they're talking about. And give that a moment's thought, you will soon realize that that is impossible in anything more than just a list of things. Because you cannot have sentences with verbs and adjectives and all that using just pictures of things. But what you can have is the beginning of written language. These are actually words and sentences and ideas, not just the physical things, but the writing system is based on the physical things. That is what makes it ideographic. However, following the Egyptians pretty quickly was a group called the Phoenicians. And they had this idea to take the Egyptian alphabet, which was created by a priestly class who had plenty of time on their hands, and they had no incentive to make their language easy for other people to understand. That was their own job security. The Phoenicians, they were a busy kind of people. They were trading all over the Mediterranean. They wanted to take this idea and make it simpler and easier to communicate with people that they traded with all over. So they came up with these symbols, which may not look that different from these symbols, but there is an important difference, and that difference is these symbols are based on the sound of the word, the spoken word, and not the idea. Now, the reason that that's a jump is that you gain legibility. If all you have is a picture of a bird and no one has told you how to pronounce that picture, there is no way you can figure out how to pronounce it. But if the symbol is based on the sound of the word and you have memorized that symbol, then you know how to pronounce it. And so that is legibility. And also it is gained in simplicity. Simplicity. Because you can have a limited number of characters that express everything that can come out of the mouth of that speaker. And that invention is called the alphabet. So alphabet gives you legibility and simplicity. Just quickly, I'm also going to say of what you lose by going to an alphabet. You lose the representation. It's not always clear what you're talking about if you can't draw a picture of it. And also you lose the ability to, let's say, cultural endurance. Because, for example, the picture of the bird in 5000 BC, it might be pronounced wah, and then in 2000 BC it might have changed to whoa or something like that, but it's still the same picture. Whereas when the oral spoken language changes, the writing, the spelling of the word has to change to fit it. So you have loss of the cultural endurance, let's say. Okay, with that under our belts, let's take a look at written Chinese. Written Chinese is written in characters. These are called Chinese characters. And anyone who has studied Chinese, whether as a child or as an adult, will tell you that there is no connection between the way that the character is written and the character's pronunciation. Okay, so what this means is that for all intents and purposes, Chinese has no alphabet. Some scholars would disagree with that. They think there are elements of Chinese characters that can give you an idea of how to pronounce it. That is true in a few cases. But for the vast majority of Chinese characters, they need to be memorized. They need to be memorized. Does that mean that in all of East Asia, there is a lack of, like a disconnect between the way that something is written and the way it's pronounced? Not necessarily. In Japanese, there are parts of the language that are the kana syllabary, and that they have to be memorized, but they're always the same pronunciation wherever you see them. And in Korean is actually a full alphabet. There was a genius king who took the Korean language, which had been written in Chinese characters at that time, and in Japanese, these parts are still Chinese characters. They're called kanji. In Korea, that famous king, he simplified it to the sounds. So he made that same jump that the Phoenicians did. And they pretty much discarded the Chinese characters. So that's Japanese and Korean. Going back to Chinese, wouldn't it be great if we had a system that would tell you how to pronounce these characters? Well, we do in Mandarin Chinese, and that system is called Pinyin. And it was developed in the 1950s when they were making a lot of changes to the language. For example, this first character here, you would write a W and an O and a tone mark over the top. Wa is how you pronounce it. However, this was not made the official writing system, although I think there were proposals to make this Pinyin system the official written standard for Chinese. But because of tradition, because of the difficulty of switching everything over, and mostly because of the culture and the inability to change the culture, the Pinyin system was not adopted as the main system. However, it does exist today mostly as a helper system. Helper. What I mean by helper is that when young children are learning to read Chinese characters in the first grades, or whenever they get to that, there will be a line of Pinyin underneath that tells them how to pronounce it. Okay? And also there is a helper function with modern technology, because on a cell phone or some other sort of device nowadays, you can type the Pinyin and a list will come up of the characters that match it, and then you just select the character that you want. Okay, so in that sense, Chinese does have an alphabet, but it is a helper alphabet. However, now that the momentum has been lost from all those changes that were being made in the 50s, and now that modern technology has intervened, I don't think that Pinyin will ever be adopted as the actual written standard of Chinese. Thank you very much. I hope that answers the question of whether or not Chinese has an alphabet.